Yes? This is more complex. I'm going to speak for 2 minutes. It seems like I'm going to have a choreography with 15 dancers on the stage. Right? Okay, we are now at the end of our meeting. Just 2 words to say what's the structure going to be, and then I will give the floor to the Professor Luigi Sacco. There will be an opening talk by Professor Sacco. Then we have a round table, yes, stricto sensu, a round table, and then we will evolve naturally to discussion and take into consideration the so-called Paris Declaration. In the program it says approval. What we will do is get feedback from you, and then the organizers and the creators of the document will decide whatever they want to do about it, okay? So I will give the floor directly now to Professor Sacco, that must be already online. Dramatic moments, dramatic tension. Sorry? Ah, here he is. Well, good afternoon, Professor Sacco. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Do you hear me? Very good. Thank you very much. So I'm really sorry not to be able to be with you today, because MESOC has been a very interesting project that I think also has super interesting perspectives, and also there is this interaction with other European projects. So I think this is a very, very important moment also to present some remarks on an issue that I think is of vital future relevance for the future of European projects and more generally of European policy, that is really evidence-based policy, cultural intervention, sorry. So this is a topic that is becoming increasingly mainstream in the European approach to cultural policy, and especially now is being conveyed not only by the background, the conceptual background provided by the new European Agenda for Culture, but now also by the new European Work Plan for Culture 23-26 and the first strategic orientations of the new KIC, Culture and Creativity. So I think that this is really an important moment to explain briefly what is the potential of this, and in some sense how this relates to future action, also because the Paris Declaration, it goes exactly in that direction, so showing a way and also building on the experience of already existing projects to open up a new perspectives for future projects, and especially for a different conception of the role of cultural policy in the more general space of policy, European policy altogether. So first of all, in the cultural field, evidence-based approaches have been controversial for a very long time. There is resistance for this because there is a widespread conviction that measuring the impact of cultural initiatives is encouraging the instrumentalization of culture. This is a perspective that, however, considers a very narrow definition of what is a measurement, and especially what is the scope and purpose of measurement in the first place. First of all, I will make an example that derives from an experience that I'm just conducting now in an international collaboration. I've been working with colleagues from Harvard University on a project that has to do with a protocol for collective reading and art making called Pretexts, that has been developed by a colleague of mine, Doris Sommer, professor at Harvard University. And it's a protocol that has to do with how this particular collective activity of interpretation of text and art making through the text influences, among other things, mental health. So in this specific case, we ran a randomized trial in Kenya in a very critical situation, in which we consider a slum at the periphery of Nairobi called Kibera, and a small but significant group of adolescents with serious problems of social integration, and also in many cases of a serious medium to high level symptoms of depression. In the randomized trial, we consider on one side this specific protocol for intervention, and on the other side the standard skills building program. It was a very brief intervention. It was 5 days and 1 hour per day, so literally an extremely short program with scope for example, having any significant effect on depression. But the point is that through the randomized trial, we found that even such a short intervention was able to produce a statistically significant drop of medium to serious depression symptoms compared to the control. However, if you consider the appreciation of the program, from the point of view of the participants, we found that there is basically no difference whatsoever in the level of appreciation between the control, the classical skills building intervention, and this specific intervention. What is the implication? Not only that interventions like this can be very impactful on issues that seem to be completely beyond the reach of cultural interventions like, for example, serious depression symptoms, but possibly even more significantly, that to assess the importance and the effect of these interventions, we cannot simply ask participants. Because from the point of view of participants, the two interventions were equally likable. And most of the evaluation that we actually carry out in culture today is about this, asking participants. How did you like it? Do you think that this improved, let's say, your mood and well-being or whatever it is? But without having a concrete measurement for this, we learn very little. On the other hand, taking this systematically, we don't only have a very, very important basis for a different approach to societal challenges with major implications like not only mental health, of course, or more generally physical health. It's also an issue of social cohesion. It has to do with the change in behavioral patterns related to global warming and climate change. So not only we have a very interesting approach to these issues that considers culture not simply in the traditional sense, but especially as a very, very important platform for the creation and evolution of behavior, which has been basically the standard way to integrate culture into our society from the very early stages of human civilization. But we also have, and this is also intriguing, a poetical possibility. For artists today, working on the understanding of the impacts of certain actions is not just a necessity to be accountable and to go for more funding. It's increasingly becoming a way to get a deeper comprehension, and in some sense also a new layer of inspiration towards the kinds of interventions and more generally the kinds of exploration of experimentations that make sense aesthetically. And from this point of view, this approach, this synthesis is basically recovering a perspective, the intertwining between the aesthetic and the pragmatic dimension that has been at the cornerstone of the American pragmatism, and especially of the John Dewey approach to art as experience, that we are rediscovering in a very interesting way in this context. So, what is important for the future is the fact that now, to remain specifically on the connection between cultural experience, cultural participation, cultural interventions, and psychological and physical well-being, is that this connection has now become not only one of the pillars of the new European Agenda for Culture already in 2018, as the so-called culture and health crossover, but it has now become one of the 21 actions, the fundamental actions that have been defined by the new work plan for Culture 23-26. With this, Europe is positioning itself as one of the most innovative and experimental areas in the world for this particular kind of activity. And this is really getting an increasing attention also from outside Europe. I personally work a lot with many other areas, countries outside of Europe, and I can testify directly to the fact that the level of attention and the curiosity towards the big assets that Europe is building up in terms of its recent increasing experience with experimentation in these fields is really, I mean, skyrocketing in the last few years, and I would say especially in the last few months. I think that among many experiences that have been interesting in this regard, a very popular one, also because it caught the attention of international media, is cultural prescriptions. As you know, and as we have Turku in our partnership here in MESOC, Turku 2011 has been one of the defining moments for cultural prescriptions, because this was part of the program of the European Capital of Culture, and since then there have been so many, and I would say innumerable at this point, attempts or let's say actual examples of replication and expansion and variation on this particular idea, that prescribing cultural experiences can become an interesting component of a new strategy, not simply of care, but of prevention, which is even more important and is aligned with the vision of the Ottawa Charter related to salutogenesis, the idea that the public health is about enabling people to maintain their state of mental and physical health rather than simply intervening when this state is compromised to some extent. And in this specific sense, so cultural prescriptions have been very popular. There has been lots of interest, but for example, we have to say today that in terms of clinical practice and in terms of the actual capacity of physicians to prescribe cultural experiences as part of a specific therapeutic approach, this is simply at the moment an act of goodwill. We have really no idea in terms of what is actually bringing about certain results or not, whether certain types of experiences are beneficial or not, and to what extent. And as I explained in the case of the randomized trial that I briefly mentioned before, is really not about how much the patients like this specific kind of experience. Recent research, other kinds of recent research also give us room for concern from this point of view. So, for example, with a couple of colleagues of mine, we have recently published a study in which we consider different experiences that at face value are very similar, like reading newspapers and magazines, or, for example, doing Sudoku or crosswords, or playing cards with other people for elderly people. So in this case, 3 different pastimes that are basically mind games that should probably have similar effects in terms, for example, of stimulating cognitive function or stimulating sociality in the case of, for example, of playing cards and so on and so forth. We found with a longitudinal evaluation technique that actually the results are extremely different. And that, for example, for elderly people, it's true that, let's say, reading magazines and newspaper can improve cognitive function, but has, for example, a very moderate effect on other health dimensions. But to the contrary, for example, playing cards can be very beneficial in many regards, but very surprisingly, it turns out that it increases substantially the susceptibility to certain forms of cancer. So how is it is possible for elderly people that a daily practice with playing cards increases the chances of cancer? Well, the answer is that this daily practice has a constant stressor element, because, of course, for elderly people accustomed to harsh competition in playing cards every single day, the level of stress that is related to this activity, if taken on a daily basis, can have very serious health consequences. So these simple examples are there to underline one very simple but very important fact. We cannot speak of arts culture and their effect on culture and on health, or mental health, or physical health. And more generally, we cannot speak of arts, culture, and their beneficial effects from the social point of view, from the behavioral point. Different kind of experiences have different kinds of consequences. And insofar as we learn to understand through specific experimentation how this works, we can really have important effects in terms, for example, of promoting culture-based approach to very important and sometimes intractable with other means societal challenges. But we have to pass from a first stage of goodwill and, let's say, spontaneous experimentation to a phase in which we build a very precise knowledge and experience with very precise kinds of interventions. And to conclude my thoughts, it's important to stress this. We are basically reinventing the wheel, because this dimension of cultural interventions is quintessential in the way in which culture was originally developed in human societies. Culture was originally related to healing. It was originally related to establishing social cohesion. It was originally related to fostering many different kinds of behavioral change. And by the way, the research that we have today, not simply in the history of art, but for example, in applying neuroscience and cognitive science methods to make sense of certain human practices, shows this very clearly. So we are not inventing anything. We are rediscovering a possibility that is deeply built into our own biological constitution, and I would say neurobiological constitution, and this is exactly the reason why they are so effective. And this is probably, and this is really my last thought, this is probably also one very interesting reason to propose cultural interventions as a real alternative to very, let's say, artificial and manipulative forms of behavioral interventions that are today very mainstream and very popular in policy design, like, for example, nudging, that overall are proving increasingly ineffective, both in terms of effect size and in terms of durability. People do not like to be manipulated, even when this is for their, let's say, wider long-term interest. So artificial interventions are probably not the right solution from this point of view. And despite the hype around nudging, this is very quickly vanishing now. So a new frontier for cultural interventions that, again, is not tweaking culture and in some sense pushing culture into, let's say, forms that are not connatural, that are not, let's say, in some sense intrinsic to the cultural expression, but on the contrary, forms that are in some sense constitutional, that have been probably the initial source, the initial inspiration for the development of cultural expression, can really become the basis for a radical alternative to policy design in which culture can really play a role of fundamental strategic importance in the construction of social and not only economic value. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, if we prefer, some questions now for Dr. Sacco. If not, we'll start with the roundtable. Right, well, in any case, if you still are with us at the end of the session, Luigi, what we will do is invite you to take part of the exchange when we discuss some aspects of the Paris Declaration. Thank you. Right, so I'll invite the rest of my colleagues and friends to come to the table, please. Rarita, Raúl, and Chema. Fabian, do I stay here or do I sit with them? I sit with them, okay, right. Yes? Okay. Okay, well, while we are settling down, and before we start with the round table, I want you to allow me to very brief comment on some things that were mentioned yesterday when different speakers shared with us their considerations and experiences on how policymakers arrive to their decisions. And this reminded me of a well-known quote of Otto von Bismarck that says, law, in our case, cultural policies, are like sausages. It is better not to see them being made. So, right. Let's get to the question. The title of our debate is Looking Towards the Future. What are the next steps for European cultural policy? And as I've already mentioned, some approach to the declaration. Right, well, going forward, the Paris Declaration is precisely in itself a proposal for moving forward. So let's start, if you like, by sharing your thoughts on the declaration. I had questions to my colleagues. I think that Ilaria is with us online as well, from Milano. And so we try and be the more precise and concrete, possibly. I would like you, in the first round, to prioritize the 7 suggestions made in the declaration. Rarita, if you like.
Well, thank you. To be honest, I find this a very difficult task because the declaration is, I don't think a lot of people have had the opportunity to see it. And it has a long text, and my memory does not stock all the points to be able to prioritize them like that. But I can say that definitely I think that is an important aspect. So my understanding of the declaration, as I've read it, is that it highlights the importance of robust research mechanisms and evaluation mechanisms for, on one hand, being able to tell and about cultural impacts, but also to inform policies. And definitely, I agree with that. I think because here we are more among let's say scientists, so I can put on my culture practitioner's hat. So I think I would also advocate for cautiousness, if that's a word, on how much burden we want to place on cultural players by prescribing more and more fixed measuring tools. I mean, I'm able to relate with what Professor Sacco mentioned, that maybe this is not an issue as such, the dilemma of instrumentalization by asking cultural organizations to measure more of their work. But I still believe that what is a huge issue right now is the level of bureaucracy that cultural organizations have to face. And I believe, and this is not a scientific-based feeling, it's more an intuition-based feeling, that that since all all this trend that started with the interest of the value of culture, there's more and more pressure, and when you write applications, you have to tick boxes, and I think this becomes a gatekeeping instrument for a lot of cultural practitioners, because they have to be able to translate their work into bureaucratic terms, and then they would also have to understand how to put these things into practice. So I would be very happy if we are able to advance on ways in which the scientific community and the cultural practice sphere are collaborating, rather than prescribing tools on how measurement should be done. Another point that I would refer to is how cultural policy institutions and agencies would need to have more robust instruments and tools to analyze before acting or taking decisions, and I would totally agree with that. So while I agree that we need more robust evaluation, measuring, and analysis at the level of the decision-making bodies and the bodies that are producing rules and frameworks, I think that this should be made very flexible and very loose when we come to the level of the practice. And I will stop here because I think it's more interesting if we have more perspectives.
Thank you, Rarita. Chema, please. I didn't present Rarita after 3 years in different areas. Rarita comes from Cluj, the cultural center, very prestigious cultural manager and operator.
Oh,
thank you. Chema, Segovia from Culturalink.
Well, going back to your question, talking about the Paris Declaration, I will talk from my experience as a policymaker, and I think that the declaration is a nice document. I think that the message, or the central message, is clear. I think it can even be effective, or as effective as these kind of documents can be. And I'm not gonna go to prioritize the 7 commitments, but I think that one of them is interesting to highlight because it seems very obvious, and very basic. But I think in a quick reading of the declaration might be overseen. But I think that point of the declaration is of particular interest because it contains part of the DNA of the MESOC project, and also has a lot to do with things that Rarita have explained. So I will connect my idea with her proposal. This point of the declaration, which I think is particularly interesting, is the one that calls to clearly define the objectives of cultural policies, projects, and strategies. The exercise of defining the objectives of a project or a strategy is very basic and very common sense, but is paradoxically we find a bunch of projects and strategy, and this is a particular issue, not only, but I think it's a particular issue with the cultural policies and projects where we don't find objectives. We just do this festival, for example, well, just because, and in many cases, when these objectives are expressed, they are very generic. Like we build this museum because of tourism attraction, etc. Furthermore, the evaluation methods that we apply to the cultural policies are also usually very generic and formulaic, and they don't pay attention to those objectives. Like as I mentioned, many times don't exist. And I think that this mismatch, which clearly makes no sense, is motivated by an idea that by the notion of evaluation as an exercise that comes after the implementation, like an exercise that is done in the phase of post-implementation of cultural projects, strategies, and policies. And I think that with this, as I said, this connecting objectives with evaluation, the MESOC, in the Declaration of Paris, the MESOC project highlights that evaluation is an exercise that begins in policy design, and that goes through the entire process, also implementation. And I think this is a strong idea, because it's understanding that evaluation is not an exercise that simply portrays cultural or cultural policies, but they configure them. I think that that's an important idea. So I will leave it right here.
Okay, well, thank you. So let's go to the digital colleague. Well, she's a real colleague, but on the digital format. Ilaria, welcome. Well, Ilaria is a researcher at the Polymil and in Milano as well. And Mr. Pizzi, she hasn't been with us here today, but we'll give her the opportunity to share some moments with us.
I really apologize not being able to be there. We have been trying to be sustainable coming by train, but we haven't had luck with that. So reading the declaration, I think it clearly emerges this need for implementing tools for the monitoring and assessment of cultural and creative activities. I think this is the main message of the declaration, which is then exploded in the 7 points. And I think MESOC tried to contribute to this by suggesting potential indicators. And of course, it makes sense to promote the use of these indicators and this kind of tools. And we are aware that this could be beneficial for the cultural sectors and to be development of proof, to prove the value of their role. And I agree with Rarita that I'm not sure that this request to prove their worth in terms of social values should be on the shoulders of the cultural operator. I find it maybe as dangerous as to ask them to prove to be economically sustainable. So maybe I believe the burden of proof should probably be on those who put public money into the decision to support certain cultural sectors or certain cultural activities or others. So maybe there is some decisions to be made.
Now, final participant, Raúl Abeledo. He's the director of the Cultural Observatory of the University of Valencia.
Well, works, yeah. To be the last one is the best part, no? Because I'm agree with everybody. No, but seriously, I would say that I'm going to make a little bit of a spoiler about the declaration, because not sure everybody knows about what is the declaration. So there are some, these 7 points that we are talking about the keywords will be that we are talking about methodologies, diversity of methodologies, quantitative, qualitative. We are talking about project objectives definitions. Also, we are talking about budget, it's an important thing. We are talking about sector demands. We are talking about indicators, databases, and protocols. So, I mean, in my opinion, this is a system. In some way, there is no way to make this kind of categorization or priorities. No, I mean, it's a whole pack. So this will be more or less my reflection about the question. This integral approach.
Okay. Well, in a moment, the declaration is going to be put on the screen, so we all know what we're talking about. I supposed it was a big supposition. We supposed too much, thinking everybody had received it and read it. But let me, before we continue, I think, so we don't lose in translation some of the contributions already made. I think that Rarita's idea, this is an author's interpretation, what's going on here, is that understanding the different proposals that have a different nature, as Raúl has summarized, can't be a straight jacket from the community, from the scientific community to the cultural operators or to the cultural policy. They should be able to transfer knowledge that makes more efficient, just, and effective cultural policy decisions and actions. So any type of protocol or arrangement should be take into consideration the two elements of this dimension, and the dialogue should be open. And this will, the dialogue in itself will be an interesting mechanism of transference of knowledge. And I think very interesting as well, a last comment of Ilaria about putting the burden of proof on the consistency of the different programs and projects should be on the public sector. I would say my contribution to this, Ilaria, would be unavoidably it has to be put on public policy decisions. So it's not the last. I think it should be understood as an obligation, responsibility of everybody involved in it. But of course, it has to be stressed the unavoidable responsibility of the public sector, having to prove the sustainability, efficiency, and of the different projects in terms of achieving their goals. Right, well, let's go forward, because I'm going to have a quick look here on how the time is, because the idea will be in 15, 20 minutes, give the floor to everybody. My question would be, how do you think, well, if we have the program, basically the program establishes so we know what we're talking about. First, clear objectives. All the programs have to establish clear objectives as the first phase of evaluation, planification. Second objective, no, not necessarily second. All projects must provide 5% of their budget to be dedicated to evaluation. So the idea is to quality evaluation. Third objective, all institutions and organizations should have an intelligence and an analysis department, a unit for research, intelligence, and evaluation. A fourth proposal, there are 7. Fourth proposal is the conventional statistical institutions. Official institutions should be they should be permeable, should be sensible to the demands from the cultural and creative ecosystem. Let me see if I've missed something else. We should move, and this is where I say take it with in bear in mind Rarita's contribution. We should move towards a standardized evaluation protocols. We'll take it with the considerations that has been taken, and probably what we said and repeated once and again, context. And obviously I'll leave it here. Another recommendation is advocating for interdisciplinary approaches on the one hand, and a sensible use of technological advances, including our famous IA, etc. That is what it breaks out the declaration. So my question would be, do you miss anything out in this declaration as concrete, practical proposals? Rarita, please.
Well, again, it's difficult to say what I miss because it's yeah. Thank you. But again, I would question and I agree with parts of each of the points. So I would not go in that because it would not be interesting anyway. But what I would question is, to what extent we are trying to kind of justify or perpetuate the status quo of a system that we are currently working in and it's feeding us as scientists, as cultural advocates, and whatever, you know. Because, for instance, defining clear objectives. I'm a fan of big objectives when it's about projects and having clarity of what is going to be delivered. But if we look on a wider perspective, and this is connected again to what Professor Sacco was saying, we are kind of now actually just dissecting something that has been there and working without us observing it. It was there in the way in which culture has worked, and we are now just rediscovering the holistic potential, the integrative potential of culture. So my point is, we now have objectives because we have projects, and projects are you know, a sequence of actions that starts in a point and ends in another. And actually, I believe that culture works better, or I should be more specific, arts works better when it doesn't have that framework. When an artist has an idea, and probably that idea is having it's generating a striking experience for us that would make us reflect, or maybe, you know, have a change of perspective. That's what we, for instance, want to have, and I think this is very difficult to measure and plan into project. This dimension of the arts, which I very much like. Also for the name, Pascal Hillen is naming this, this measure of value of art is exactly something that you can't even measure. This dimension of art, how does it fit into this framework that we are operating in, which is that culture is only financed on project basis. That research that is looking to define new paradigms or frameworks, they are being also supported on a project-based framework. Again, after listening, very interesting and fascinating tools proposed from different Horizon projects. My question in front of this overwhelming amount of knowledge is how to make it digestible and work, operationable for someone that is really a practitioner. And I think we need to suggest to the European Commission to put some money again to bring these teams together and find a way to integrate and make some more easy to navigate ways to use all this knowledge. Well, to make my long point short is that I think it would be interesting to also question the way in the bigger framework in which we are trying to find some solutions. Even, for instance, I would be very happy if the Romanian decision makers would have policy for analysis tools for policies, but the truth is of especially South, Central, and especially Eastern European countries is that we do not have cultural policies, you know? So the discussion is more basic from this perspective. We are actually trying to use these scientific arguments from the cultural sector to convince the decision makers that we need some cultural policies. So I would dream to have those policymakers that would use these tools to define objectives that would generate consequences in a few years' time, but it's not the case. So some of these tools are not even being to be relevant to all the different contexts in Europe, not speaking further.
Well, I'll try and discuss that with you in a moment, if we have time. I have another question prepared for that. Chema.
Well, something that I miss in the declaration, or not really miss, but something, a small detail, but that I will discuss. No? There are like a couple, and it relates once again with what Rarita has just explained. There are a couple of mentions in the Paris Declaration to public scrutiny and transparency. And I think that those terms that evokes auditing makes, or they evoke like a kind of judgment that is done from the outside of the cultural sphere, from the outside of the cultural community. And I think that idea of evaluation or showing your evidence and so on, the resistance that you talk about, I think that is rooted on that, and it's a problem. But I think that once more, I think that the MESOC project proposes a change of perspective that is valuable on those terms. And I think that the singularity and one of the biggest interest of the MESOC project is developing an evaluation method that is constructed within the cultural sphere. That is not only focused on impacts as results that are externally identified, but it's like, I think that the black box metaphor is very powerful to open that black box, as Professor Sacco also said. Evaluation is not only about scrutiny and auditing, it's about comprehending what we are doing. And I think that in this case, for us as cultural operators, policymakers, etc., we really need, and that was an idea that yesterday Tony also proposed, we really need to increase the instrumental rationality of what we are doing, because many things that we are doing doesn't work, and and that affects to our legitimacy. No? So I think that many of the tools and resources that MESOC has developed are really useful for us to reinforce are not like tools for some sort of judges that are over there, not just telling the cultural community what to do. No? And I think that there is a shift of perspective that is really strong on that.
Okay, well, let's, if you like, we'll go back to Ilaria.
Yes. So I think in its final point, the declaration advocates for statistical agency to be sensitive to cultural ecosystem. And I think this is important, but I think that this is an issue that concerns not only statistical agencies, but many other actors, and including also agents of these cultural ecosystems themselves. I think we are optimists now because we are seeing a lot of attention to culture from different agencies and also from the EU. But I think we are also aware that we will be continue dealing with limited resources dedicated to culture. So I think this awareness of the importance of knowing how local ecosystems, for example, are composed and operate, and especially how open or exclusive they are, it's crucial to have synergic efforts and to increase input even in a condition of limited resources. And what we have been trying to do with MESOC is to highlight some of these conditions that can, and factors that can affect the capacity of cultural initiative to be impactful, especially when dealing with fragile or with excluded population. And I think it would be important to make policymakers aware of those so that they could not only support directly cultural initiatives, but also indirectly working by creating these favorable conditions to make this ecosystem able to be actually creative and also inclusive.
Okay, thank you, Ilaria. Raúl, do you mind if I say something at this moment? Do you mind if I speak now? I wanted to say something, a comment, because so it doesn't get old, stale. Yes, it has to do with Rarita's description of reality. Certain parts of Europe doesn't have cultural policies to be measured and evaluated. This is the idea, if that is the only perspective that we use of the measuring. I think I'm very near to close to the sensibility of Chema. If we understand evaluation from our perspective as trying to provide ourselves with knowledge of the impacts of the objectives that we have established. This has the usefulness of empowerment of the cultural operators. It gives us more control of our projects and the outcomes of our projects. From that way, I believe that this is a resource for us to be more relevant to our own objectives. So that would be the idea. The external idea of control, evaluation, well, that can easily be trapped by the existing bureaucracy that always has a capacity of paralyzing and is very inefficient in general. But I do accept as a very low and practical technique, I always recommend some of the people I work with to do outside evaluations, but with our own peers. This makes things more relaxed in terms, and it produces a very healthy, how you say this, a very healthy distance from our own ways of reading our reality. So even in conditions of very precarious or undeveloped cultural policy or cultural administration, movements in the realm of knowledge, tools, resources that could be activated by MESOC could be useful even in those situations. That is my opinion.
Now I need to react. Sure. I agree with you, and I agree, of course. And what I want to say is that if we are operating within the given framework, I totally agree with you, and a lot of my work is going into this direction. So I'm just trying to bring arguments that are maybe more marginal into this conversation, and this is why, to the concrete example that you say, of course, I would say the same thing to my colleagues, cultural practitioners, but here in this conversation, I think, but what if we didn't have projects? You know, it's a very valuable thing to measure against objectives, a project. But I don't think projects are the tool that is best suited for cultural activity. And this is where I want to leave the conversation, is just that, you know.
Okay. Well, I will not abuse Raúl's generosity, but we have something to talk about later.
You have an affair, so I think it takes time. It was just because, I mean, and some link is connected with that, no? I mean, if you told me about what I miss, not a special thing from a technical point of view, but I think I miss from a political point of view, in the sense that Chema talks about transparency. I will include the question of governance, no, in the sense of even evaluation for what, no? It's important, no? You talk about not evaluation at the end of the cycle, but from the beginning. So the purpose of this evaluation is also connected with the ideological framework. For example, we are talking about cultural sectors or cultural industries or cultural organizations. We can see that there is I mean, the political approach to the evaluation and the implication, these implications in the sense, and governance. I think it's a must to consider in the sense that of who watches the watchmen, no, in some way, no, because I mean, it's not from my experience in the Cultural Observatory, in the Observatory Cultural Universitat, it's every day is more clear. I mean, that this part that we are not considering, for example, in terms of what kind of model of cultural policies linked. We are talking about this connection with the territorial development, no? But what kind of territorial development are we talking about, no? So I think this political approach to the evaluation, I think it's what I miss really in the declaration, because it's not a technical exercise. It's also a technical exercise, but not only a technical exercise, no? And I think in the shadows is where the things are cooking, and it's the interest in elements and questions.
Okay, thank you, Raúl. Well, let's push it forward. Some of you already have made a comment towards it. How does the MESOC project in its actual state of development fit with the orientations suggested by the declaration? Is there a fit-in? Do you think, apart from your red flag, let's be careful that we're not drafting a proclamation for our self-interest as a community or whatever we can consider ourselves, do you find an easy fit between what we've been developing during the last 3 years and the declaration? Is the declaration the natural, could it offer a pathway for the future? A pathway, not the?
I think, yes. Again, I think I would be more of a fan of a list of recommendations that something that is called declaration. But otherwise, I think yes. And this is the moment when I think I would praise the MESOC project. I think the different attempts to develop new frameworks, to see from different perspectives how the let's say effects of culture or cultural interventions can be measured on different social dimensions, I think is really important. And for instance, for my work, for the work that we're doing, like in the city of Cluj, where we're trying to find innovative but practical ways to support the local development through different roles for culture in the city. It's very important to be able to relate to understandable or comprehensive frameworks, to be able to relate to something when advocating for the type of work that we are doing. So I think it's really important, the work that has been done in the project. So in that sense, having the recommendations stemming from the project, I think is very coherent. Now maybe the nuances of these proposals need to be worked to totally fit my liking, but I think there has been a very valuable work done. And maybe one thing that I would really appreciate is if in the remaining time of the project we can maybe deliver some tutorials or some in-depth workshops for practitioners on how one specific tool can be used. Because I think when you, in a conference like this, when you just look at all of them in a single shot, it's overwhelming. But if you go into the details of it, considering the different interests and needs, then I think it could leave an interesting legacy.
Okay, thank you. Well, probably in this sense, the book that are preparing that is getting the intention of the book, that the University of Barcelona and the policy briefs that Kea with Artur are thinking of could work in this orientation, helping to I want to measure my words here, could help to invite a larger community to participate in the production of knowledge, and it is not dumbing it down. We're not going to. The idea is not a book and policy papers to break down for a supposed ignorant or not qualified public. The idea is to open it up to a larger part, other sectors of the cultural system, in other realms of society, to participate in this process of building knowledge. So that is, I think, we have high expectations, or I have high expectations with the work of the University of Barcelona team and the policy briefs of Kea. Right. As I have been able to nudge Rarita towards an appraisal of MESOC, is not my intention. I'd like Chema, if you can say whatever you like, but what you least like about the MESOC project?
Well, okay, let's be. Well, I think that one of the virtues of the MESOC project is also one of its unfinished business, and its main problems. Well, the MESOC project tried to tackle a very complex issue, for doing so, it developed multiple approaches, At the end of the process, they tried to integrate them into this convergent model, and to classify their outcomes, with knowledge, results, and I think that it's nice, that all of those, the diversity, and that all those elements, they are more or less coherent, but it's nice that they do not perfectly match, But I think that at the same time, it should be really nice to improve the articulation, between those things, because while I heard yesterday morning, the explanation. I think that there are really powerful concepts. And for example, I think that the cultural experience idea, and placing it in the center, and seeing how it relates with production, consumption, and like a map for drawing the different. That's super interesting. But once you go beyond that, and you start, and the different partners of the projects start to explain the results, that they have been more involved in, you can find a lot of redundant concepts that are overlapped, some concept that seems very clear for one partner, while the other say they are not completely defined. So I think that there is, that deserves to be a bit more focused, no? And I think that work of focusing the whole framework of MESOC has more to do with cleaning it up than in adding complexity, no? And I think that it deserves because once more, I really think that the MESOC approach has a strong potential, no? I think that in the MESOC approach, we could say there is a seminal paradigm shift, no, maybe, because, well, we have been like decades, no, talking about access, and as we say, no, access is a precondition, as Pau said in the introduction of the session of yesterday, but it doesn't guarantee anything, no. After access, we were fascinated with participation, and it has exactly the same problem, no? After that, we discovered cultural rights, which are really useful, but are difficult to make them operative, no? And I really think that this approach, no, of the MESOC project, this and this is now these ideas that, like 4 years ago when I first heard about them, I didn't have a clue what they mean, like the variable transition, the signals of transition, enabling factors, and so on. Even now it's difficult to understand the difference between them, but those I think that are really, really powerful ideas, no? And clarify them should be useful, as I say, no, to really propose alternative approaches to cultural policy, no, that overcome or surpass the ones that we are still using.
Thank you, Chema. Ilaria, what's the less convincing aspects of MESOC, in your opinion?
Well, I have to thank Chema for having said very elegantly and powerfully what I would also have probably highlighted. I think there is a need for a certain harmonization and alignment of certain concepts in the way we would explain ourselves. And I think the work that the University of Barcelona is doing with the handbook, it's very relevant, and they have a lot of responsibility, not to put pressure on them. So this is one point, and probably what I've also would add is that I was very happy to listen to what Professor O'Brien was telling us today, because I think that maybe if I have to really see a weakness in what we did, is that we probably suffer from a certain bias by having to give proof of the positive connection between culture and social impact. We were probably looking only at positive impacts, while, for example, from my background from the urban studies, we know that, for example, when we talk about urban regeneration and gentrification processes that can be connected to culture-led urban regeneration, we know that there are also some negative impacts that could be linked to a certain kind of cultural action. And also we might have considered access to the cultural experience, both in terms of participation and in terms of production, as it would be open and accessible to everyone, which is not the case. We know that this is not the case. So maybe these are some elements of attention that we should consider that could be material for the next stage of work of MESOC.
Thank you. Raúl.
More or less is connected with what we are talking about, no? Since the beginning, Chema talks about cultural rights, for example, and the conflictual exists. Yeah. The conflictual approach to the matter, no, to the object of study. Maybe is what, from my particular point of view, we have Pau and I different visions, and I mean positive, negative, and yin and yang in some way. And it's connected with this question that we were talking about, that this technical approach versus more political approach, and when you are talking about what we are talking about, no? But I mean, it's connected with the question we were talking about, the governance against, with the participation, with the question of the cultural rights, with the question of the conflicts that are outside, no? I mean, that sometimes is, it's a problem of not of MESOC. I mean, it's a problem also with the European projects in general and with the consultancy projects in some way, no? That it's paper is very resistant to everything, no? But reality is another thing, no? And at this moment, for example, the context, no? In my opinion, the current context in terms of in the European Union and all around the world, no? This kind of multi-crisis everywhere at the same time and so on, not just the environmental crisis, but the social crisis, the economic crisis. It's something that I miss, in the sense that it's a reality that it's not here, but it's going to be even better or worse in the next years, no? And even the European project, no? The European Union project, in some way, is something that we can argue and discuss, and is connected with culture and the culture and the European citizenship and so on. So when we are evaluating, we are talking about this. We are talking about that we are evaluating from a cultural and creative industries approach. This Florida's speech about creative cities. I mean, this kind of beautiful la vie en rose, no? Beautiful side of life, or we are talking about more about this kind of tempest that is coming in the horizon.
Okay, well, while we are waiting to overthrow the global government, we are obliged to qualify our practices and our actions to be responsible of what we decide to do, even if it's on a tactical and modest level. I will recover for you to bear in mind the proposal of Rarita. Another one is the idea, probably through the project or through whatever we do, is to test the applicability and the intelligibility of the MESOC project on certain grassroots. That would give a hell of a lot of feedback, and it would tell us if we're on the right course. That could be through workshops or for whatever. No? Now I'll give you a last question we've got very short time, 5 minutes between all of us to answer. Do you find any immediate applicability uses of the MESOC project in its actual stage of development? That would be my question to close the roundtable.
Yes, I would say that, for instance, we are interested in Cluj to have Romanian translation of the AU culture platform, and find a way to make it available for the local cultural organizations, and build on that, you know. I'm also very much interested on the theoretical model that is backing that. I found, and we had a lot of discussions with Sandy about that, that I find that would be much more relevant than complex the complex models for the direct work with cultural organizations. The model that is behind our platform is it explains in a way that is easy to relate to from the cultural practitioners. Yeah.
Chema, briefly, please.
Yeah, well, in my case, as a researcher, I will study the convergent model. No, it specifically called my attention, and I need to comprehend it more deeply because it's promising. And as a policy maker, no, I'm looking forward for the book that the people from Barcelona are preparing. And also, I will study in detail the work done by Polimino with this. I think this is also very interesting, with this differentiation of scales, like the micro and the meso scales. And for, in my case, that we are used to develop or design policies and projects that are constructed in a process-based. I think that it will be a very useful resource for doing that.
Ilaria, please.
I can only agree with Rarita and with Chema. I think the toolkit was a good intuition of the project to be able to provide tools that are ready to be used, and I think that this is a great effort that the consortium did to have these tools ready to be used. And I also think that the conceptual framework could be a good instrument for policy designers to have an idea of how to really support this kind of cultural actions, and to have an idea also of the range of impacts that could be attached to this kind of investments.
Raúl?
I think it was Robert that speaks about the window of opportunities at the time of including the questions in the political agenda. From the point of view of the technical design of the project, I think, I mean, it's quite easy to go to practice. My doubts are connected with the other two things: the social value of culture, that is another aspect, and the political priorities. But I think from the point of view of the product in terms of design and technical characteristics and so on, it's more or less easy to transfer from theory or methodology to the practice.
Okay, well, we have arrived practically 1 minute earlier than what we had expected for the program. Thank everybody at the table. Thank you for reading the notes and considering them relevant, to give a bit of organization. If you would like to know my personal opinion about it, listening for these days, while I understand that the pathways that Paul described need more depuration to identify, I was looking at that scheme, enabling factors, sub-factors, I don't know if we can call them, if in transitional variables or symptoms of anticipation or whatever, and then the proxies and then the indicators. I was thinking about a project that we have recently in the realm of urban policy activated by from the cultural sector. I was looking from forward to back, and I would have rewritten certain aspects probably, or rethought on it in certain aspects. So understand it is unfinished work. I mean, our project, I found it very useful and stimulating from day zero. Okay, well, thank you very much. Now, if you like, I don't know, Paolo, do you expect me to open the floor or give it to Francesco? Right, well then, thank you very much. We'll go to the so-called non-provisional Paris declaration or recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all of you for the interesting panel. Unfortunately, I could not follow you in full because we did some background work to land into this text here. Just to remind all of you of what we did previously, and also to the benefit of the few people who don't belong to the consortium. There was an initial draft of this declaration, and text was shared on Basecamp a while ago. And then what was evident in the beginning of the day today was the unfinished nature of the text. So what we decided earlier was to produce a text which can still be commented, and to broaden the participation of potential signatories to this text, we would also like to publish the text as it is on the MESOC website, leave to everyone the possibility of commenting, including and starting from the partners of this consortium, and also people who do not belong to the consortium who may be asked to sign it. It will be named probably the MESOC Declaration instead of the Paris Declaration to put clarity in the picture, but it's more or less what we have been talking about until today. So what I would like to do is to read it, knowing that every person registered in Basecamp can have access to this text, because I just shared the Word document to Basecamp. Nevertheless, we have the draft in the internal SharePoint of the University of Valencia. And I want to thank Jeff from WorkCrunch for doing the proofreading. So at least we are doing bella figura for the English. And then for the contents, let's see. Anyway, all of you registered in Basecamp, you can download the document. As I said, it is open to your comments. So the title is, if you allow me, I would like to read it, because it's quite short in the end. So the title is Deepening the Transformative Impact of Arts and Culture Through Evidence-Based Approaches. We, the signatories of this declaration, being aware of the emerging connections between art, education, technology, innovation, heritage, and scientific culture, and their strategic value for the projection of cities and territories into a future of reinforced rights in a democratic society, recognizing the need of framing and promoting those connections within new human-centered policies aimed at responding to challenges such as the health crisis, the climate emergency, and persistent social inequalities, welcoming the new wave of diffused legitimization of cultural policies after the huge budget cuts initiated after the 2008 global financial crisis, which had prioritized efficient public expenditure, including in cultural heritage, having well in mind that nowadays art and culture are widely recognized for their capacity to facilitate societal cohesion and citizen engagement, build and improve common spaces for living and socially interacting, and ultimately improve people's well-being and health, warmly welcome, we the signatories, the vision of the latest work plan for culture 2023-2026, which delineates a holistic perception of culture that is articulated across many policy fields, and more specifically acknowledges culture's capacity to define our foundations, shape our daily lives, and structure our collective future. That's page 1. Page 2. In a world that is more globalized, but also more fractured, where the green and digital transitions are becoming imperatives and unknown societal risks are likely to appear, we need ambitious cultural policy goals. We concur on that vision and share its ambition to build a more coherent European cultural policy ecosystem. At both the local and global levels, the role of science is accelerating. This is due to the growing understanding that science is an integral part of culture, not only responsible for exciting technological advances, the evolution of innovation systems, and the development of more open participatory and transdisciplinary research and knowledge transfer processes. This is witnessed by the recent introduction of the new European Bauhaus, a movement that puts culture, creativity, and innovation back at the center of the debate on sustainable development and social inclusion, which has been reinforced in the aftermath of the pandemic crisis. Within this framework, we contend that until today, European stakeholders and citizens have shared a sort of intuitive perception that the cultural experiences of people and related projects, programs, and policies able to support them are an important factor for the social, political, and symbolic cohesion of the community. However, the advocacy of the relevance of art and culture needs to make further progress from a mere accumulation of anecdotal evidence episodes supported by well-intentioned and attractive narratives, but showing too little rigor and replicability to become truly conceptual and operational tools for designing better, fairer, and more efficient interventions. We believe that a further argument in favor of such progress is the recent surge of investigations on the design of science for policy tools, which include new evaluation mechanisms, competencies, and more democratic and effective ethical codes, which surely have an impact on academic science, but can also turn out to significantly contribute to tackling societal challenges. In light of the above, our view is that we are at an inflection point where we must grasp this unique and invaluable opportunity to dig deeper into the relationship between culture, the arts, and societal transformation. And this is the main statement of the declaration. And then we have the next page. This challenge of the EU-funded project, the challenge of the EU-funded project MESOC was to develop new approaches and improved methodologies and tools for capturing the wider societal value of culture, which includes, but is not limited to, economic impact. We wanted to support new, effective, and inclusive policies and institutional frameworks that offer a convincing vision for citizens to cope with current cultural and societal transformations. However, concepts such as social cohesion, personal and collective well-being, or urban renewal allude to enormously complex societal problems, and it would therefore be illusionary and ultimately disappointing to convey the idea that art and culture are always a good solution to these challenges. To achieve that, we need the articulation of different methodologies, both quantitative and qualitative, to be more precise and concrete in the direction, dimension, and causality of impacts. It is time to propose common and concerted protocols and procedures for new cultural policies to be evidence-based and truly pursue social transformation objectives. We demand the attention of cultural policymakers so that all operators interacting across the cultural ecosystem acquire certain commitments, including to explicitly and concretely highlight in cultural projects, programs, and policies the social, economic, culture, or other objectives pursued by the implementation of such projects or programs. Allocate in the design of cultural projects, programs, and policies the necessary resources, 5% of the budget, to develop evaluation and monitoring processes without compromising on cultural funding. We must deepen the collaboration among all the agents of the cultural ecosystem to generate indicators as well as new sources of data and methodologies to capture all the relevant dimensions of culture. In a field such as culture, which is so heterogeneous and so dependent on the specific territorial context, it is particularly necessary to converge towards standardized, albeit flexible, evaluation protocols. We must convince and engage the practitioners using intensive data analysis and artificial intelligence that culture is at the heart of many of the great questions around humanity's societal challenges. And we also have to push for more official statistical institutions to be sensitive and responsive to the demands of the cultural ecosystem. Last page. We believe our demands are central to building a prosperous, cohesive, just, resilient, and beautiful Europe. This declaration is a first step towards a cooperative and united response that we will pursue towards a fair, just, and creative Europe. It is also a call for contributions from various horizons, cultural workers, researchers, and policymakers to discuss these proposals and, most importantly, to test and experiment these ideas in the field. Ah, yeah. Sorry. Just any comment?
I just want to add a few things, but because I think that the spirit is really what we wanted, is part of our project, and I suppose everyone will agree, or most of us will agree of that, and we'll have many people backing this declaration. Maybe it could be a good idea that these few things that some of us we could think that we could improve, we could have just a short, I don't know, 1 week maximum in order to give the possibility to add these small changes in order to have the final version. And from this very moment, being able to publish in the website and start the process of having bakers, people who believe that is important. I don't think now is the moment for just adding these extra things that myself I'm just writing here. But
I was asking for are comments if we are on the right track or not. Then, like I said, there will be time, and your proposal is accepted by default. Please, Robert.
Yeah, well, let's say again now from this aspect of external person and policymaker, but also one experience with implementation of these kind of things. I think that this is a great declaration, and having it read carefully, it actually includes all the dimension, and especially what was maybe the cultural manager's fear. It's very precisely already there. So this commitment also required 5% of the budget allocation, not arming the rest of the budget. So this is a great formulation. So it means that this is not going to harm the cultural institutions or operators in then their implementation of the measuring the social dimension of culture. But now let's say the task would be to the whole system, and especially what was said by some of the participants, that now we have to go to the financial decision makers so that they guarantee these commitments will be fulfilled by all. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comment? Cornelia?
Yes, thank you. As also coming from the cultural sector, I just would like to remind that 95% of the cultural sector has less than 10 employees. So also this 5% has to be somehow in line with that. I understand what you're saying, but knowing that the cake is still the same size, I would really reconsider to actually not have this 5% in it, just because we know that the cake is not going to increase by 5% in order to have this part.
Thank you. Okay, so in case there is no other comment, I think we can close here. Like I said, now you are all in possession of the Word file, including the wrong date. But maybe with Sandy, we can make sure that all of you have access to the internal SharePoint space of the University of Valencia. This requires registration. There's one more comment. So please ask for being registered in our space so that you can comment directly on the text or make changes directly on the text in order to save time with versioning and so on. Please.
I know that this is not the moment to propose a modification, no? But it's important to send explicit message to organisms like the statistics officers, because from here your proposal theoretical and methodological model to measure the impact of the social impact of culture. No? For that, one of the target must to be the statistic office in all Europe, European Union. No? I don't know if you have to put it in the declaration, but maybe then do another document with this target. No, it's very important because in general the declaration has a lot of principles, and all people could be think the same, but we need to look for some change in the public in policies, no? And for that, some target must to be there explicit, no?
Yes.
In fact, perhaps I can reply to that because that's one of the last report that we're going to publish, and it's exactly this, looking at policymakers and statistical institutes in particular. So that's a very good point, and the best thing is that it's in the pipelines. Thanks a lot.
Paul, you want to say no? So as we discussed and we decided, we will share, we have already shared the Word document, but if you ask us for permission, we will share the space. And in 1 week, with all the comments received, we will deliver a new edition, which is the one that will be put on publication. We have to be careful with timing because there is not that much time left. So if we want to give visibility to this declaration, we must be out by, I think, the 20th of March, the latest. And so it's something really taking a few days to be done, but I hope that by reading it on the plane while going back, you will all realize what are the main points, of attention. And so in case, just drop us an email to highlight those points, and that will already be useful. Having said that, I think we can close. You want to be the one that closes, Paul? It's yours. No? Do your job. Okay, so I thank you all for participating, for resisting the pressure until now. Personally, I couldn't talk to each of you as much as I had wanted, but I think this is not the very last time we will interact again. I want to thank again WorkCrunch and Relais Culture Europe, all the team and the technical team they hired to make this event possible. I think it was excellent. I have no real comment, no real, you know how prissy I am usually, but in this case I don't really have anything to say. So congratulations, and carry on, because it will be good for your business as well. We already thanked the hosts of this venue, and now as last technical point, thinking of the near future, we received from some of the speakers the request to package all the presentations. So I asked Esther, but I asked each of the presenters that are still in this room if you want to make any changes to the slides. Otherwise, we will go with those slides, and we will have to make a package and share it quite soon, because this was the request before they forget about us. So let's be consistent.
My only thing is that do we have to keep it, do we have to keep it, this urban renewal? This term is very uncomfortable for me, but I know that this is a term used eventually even in the call of the MESOC project. But this is very, very, very limited as per the meaning it is associated with.
Make a proposal.
Or, no, this is not a linguistic issue, because I can make a proposal. The problem is to what extent we want it to be different from that one, being it also used in the call. We know that.
That will depend on your proposal.
I will do this.
So as I was saying, the next thing is to approve all the slides. We have a small issue with the fonts. Esther already knows that, so I expect the slides to be shared will have the right font. And then we have the deliverables. So now we were in a rush. Some of the deliverables, like Arthur's policy brief, just came up. I didn't even have the time of reading it myself. There are some extra deliverables, like from the city of Rijeka. But now the target is only to finalize all the information that we are mandated by the contract to deliver until the end of the project, which is until the end of May. So plenty of time, but let's be a bit strict this time. So let's take the end of April rather than the end of May as our target deadline, so that any delay can be accommodated and we can close the technical part until the end of May. Then you know that there are 2 more months to finalize the payments and the financial reporting. So plenty of time, but now the only thing we have to do to protect our interests is to be consistent up to the time of the final delivery of the very last deliverable of this project. And for the rest, I hope there will be new opportunities. The discussion, even yesterday's speech by the director of EIT, I think it was very inspiring also in terms of suggesting opportunities that we can bilaterally discuss. So let's keep the doors open and see what we can do further together. With that, I thank you very much. I apologize because of my health problems, which impeded proper communication, but the English was that one, even without the flu. And so, till next time. Thank you.